There is a number, a single line painted on the canyon walls of the American Southwest, a line that separates survival from catastrophe, and right now, the water is falling toward it. Fast, this isn't a problem for the future. It is a crisis happening today. At this very moment, the largest reservoir in the United States is draining at a rate of billions of gallons per day. A white scar of mineral crust, a bathtub ring, grows wider with every sunrise, marking what is already gone. Every foot the water drops reveals something new. Ghost towns. Forgotten riverbeds. A history long thought buried, now re-emerging into the desert sun. And the latest federal projections are not just concerning. They are dire. A catastrophic plunge is no longer a worst-case scenario. It is now the most probable outcome. A future that was once unthinkable is arriving ahead of schedule. We're breaking down exactly what this new critical level means for 40 million people. Before we do, let us know in the comments what you think the ultimate solution is. Is it even solvable? The theories you have are a critical part of this conversation. Right now, an enormous percentage of the people who watch our documentaries are not subscribed. We get it. You get caught up in the story. But to keep making these deep dives, to keep reporting on urgent stories like this one, we absolutely need your support. It takes 1 second. Click subscribe. It is the single most important thing you can do to make sure this work continues. It's an emergency for this channel, and we need your help. Now, let's begin. The machine has started to fail. That is the simplest way to put it. The Hoover Dam is not just a wall holding back water. It is a gargantuan power plant, a hydroelectric engine that has fueled the growth of the Southwest for nearly a century. An engine that is now sputtering, and the sound is making water managers across 3 states and 1 country profoundly nervous. The problem is elevation. It has always been about elevation. The dam's turbines, 17 of them in total, were engineered for a world where Lake Mead was full, or close to it. They were designed to spin under immense pressure from a massive column of water pressing down from above. But that world is gone. As of mid-June 2026, Lake Mead's water level hovers between 1,046 and 1,049 feet above sea level. Every day, it drops, sometimes 0.15 feet in a single 24-hour period, sometimes more. A tenth of a foot may not sound like much. But on a reservoir this size, it represents an almost incomprehensible volume of water. Billions of gallons. Gone. Every day. Engineers have a name for the point of no return. Dead pool. For Lake Mead, that number is 895 feet. At that elevation, gravity gives up. The water is too low to flow through the dam's lowest outlets and travel downstream to Arizona, to California, to Mexico. At 895 feet, the river effectively stops. The lower basin goes dry. But the crisis doesn't begin at 895 feet. It begins much, much higher. The number that matters right now is 1,035 feet. That is the hydropower cliff. Tom Bishotsky, the director of the Arizona Department of Water Resources, has been warning about this for years. He is the principal negotiator for a state that stands to lose almost everything. And his assessment is chillingly direct. We're going to go to 1,035, he has stated publicly. There's no question that's going to happen. It is not a guess. It is math. The U.S. Bureau of Reclamation's own June 2026 projections, their most probable 24-month study, shows Lake Mead hitting that 1,035-foot mark well before it reaches its projected unprecedented new low of 1,015.77 feet by the summer of 2027. The cliff is directly ahead. Why is 1,035 feet so important? Because 12 of the Hoover Dam's 17 turbines were never designed to operate efficiently below that level. As the water drops, the pressure decreases. The turbines spin slower. The power they generate collapses. Not to zero. Not yet. But the drop-off is extreme. A potential loss of up to 70% of the dam's output. The lights don't all go out at once. They dim. Catastrophically, this isn't just about water anymore. It is an energy crisis hiding in plain sight. The cheap, clean hydropower that has underwritten the Southwest's growth for decades disappears. And it must be replaced. Replaced with power from natural gas plants, from coal, from whatever is available on the open market at peak summer prices. The result is immediate and unavoidable. Electricity bills across Nevada, Arizona, and Southern California don't just rise, they spike, just as the summer heat cranks up and air conditioners are needed most. The U.S. Bureau of Reclamation sees what's coming. They are already spending $52 million on a desperate, last-ditch engineering effort to replace the original turbines with new wide-head models. Turbines specifically designed to operate in low-water conditions. It is a remarkable feat of forward-thinking engineering. It is also an admission of defeat, a signal that they do not believe the lake will recover to its historic levels anytime soon. They are retrofitting the ship while it is sinking. It's been 3 minutes, and here's a critical question. Should the federal government step in and force cuts, or should the states be left to negotiate? This is the core of the political battle. Let us know who you think should have the final say in the comments below. The dam was built on a promise. The region was settled on a lie. To understand the crisis of 2026, you have to go back to 1922, to a document that sealed the fate of 40 million people before most of their great-grandparents were even born. The Colorado River Compact. It was an ambitious plan, born of the progressive era's belief that nature could be tamed, that rivers could be quantified, and that the future could be neatly allocated on paper. 7 basin states, Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming in the upper basin, Arizona, California, and Nevada in the lower, gathered to divide the river's bounty. They agreed to a total allocation of 15 million acre-feet of water per year, with another 1.5 million later promised to Mexico. There is just one problem. The river they were dividing didn't actually exist. The measurements they used, the flow data they relied on, were taken during one of the wettest periods in the last 1,200 years. It was an anomaly, a statistical fluke. But they treated it as the baseline. They wrote a check that the river could never cash. For decades, the system got by. The great reservoirs, Lake Powell upstream and Lake Mead downstream, acted as massive savings accounts, storing water from the wet years to cover the dry ones. When the Hoover Dam was dedicated by President Franklin D. Roosevelt on September 30th, 1935, it was hailed as a triumph of American ingenuity, a monument to man's ability to make the desert bloom. As Lake Mead began to fill, it submerged entire landscapes, including the small Mormon settlement of St. Thomas. The town's disappearance under the rising blue water was a symbol of progress, of a new era dawning. That era reached its high water mark in July of 1983. For the first and only time in its history, Lake Mead was so full that water flowed over the dam's emergency spillways, carving channels into the canyon walls. That is what full looks like. A force of nature so powerful it had to be bailed out, like an overflowing tub. Then came the year 2000, and the beginning of the end of that world. The start of a multi-decade mega-drought, compounded by rising global temperatures. A drought that scientists like Kevin White at Arizona State University now see as a permanent shift. A process of aridification. The desert wasn't just in a dry spell. The desert was expanding. The optimism of 1922 became the structural deficit of 2002. Since the turn of the millennium, the Colorado River system has been in a state of constant, accelerating collapse. The bathtub ring appeared. The 160-foot decline began. Jennifer Pitt, who directs the Colorado River program for the National Audubon Society, has spent her life on this river. Her words capture the impossible crossroads. We have 19th century law, 20th century infrastructure, and 21st century hydrology and water demand, she says, and it's not lining up very well. It is the most profound understatement in the American West. The system is broken. If you find this analysis valuable, if you think this is a story that needs to be told, please take a moment to like this video and share it, especially with family or friends who live in the affected regions. Awareness is the first step, and sharing this documentary helps put the pressure where it's needed. Thank you. Now, let's get back to the impossible politics. The rules are about to expire. On December 31st, 2026, the entire framework governing the Colorado River, the complex web of agreements known as the 2007 Interim Guidelines and the 2019 Drought Contingency Plans, simply ceases to exist. After that date, there is no plan. There is only chaos. It is a policy cliff that mirrors the hydropower cliff, a man-made deadline for a natural disaster. At the center of this storm is one person, M. Camille Kalimlim Touton. As the Commissioner of the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, she has arguably the most difficult job in the federal government. It is her responsibility to manage the collapse, to broker a new deal between 7 sovereign states, 40 million people, and a multi-billion-dollar agricultural industry, all while the river itself vanishes beneath their feet. Her message to the states has been brutally clear. The basin is in a structural deficit. The math no longer works. To merely stabilize the reservoirs, to stop the bleeding and keep them from hitting dead pool, the basin needs to permanently cut its water use by a staggering 2 to 4 million acre-feet. Every single year. Forever. That's more water than the entire state of Arizona is entitled to. And the negotiations are going nowhere. The states are gridlocked. California, holding senior water rights from the old law of the river, has been slow to offer significant concessions. Arizona, whose Central Arizona Project canal system faces the most immediate and severe mandatory cuts, argues it has already given enough. The upper basin states worry that if they conserve water, the lower basin will simply take it. It is a perfect storm of self-interest, legal precedent, and profound distrust, all happening on the deck of a sinking ship. The federal government has repeatedly threatened to impose its own solution. If the states cannot reach an agreement by the 2026 deadline, Commissioner Totten and the Department of the Interior may have no choice but to declare an emergency and enforce unilateral, non-negotiable cuts. It is a political nuclear option that no one wants, but one that becomes more likely with every passing day. The clock is not just ticking, it is screaming. I know, this is the second time I'm asking, but it's that important. Just a quick check. Have you hit subscribe yet? No joke. Our analytics shows so many of you watch right to the end and just forget. Think of it as your vote to keep this kind of deep, investigative content alive and well, and not buried under algorithm fluff. Okay, lecture over, for now. The problem is worse than you think, because the lake isn't just emptying, it's changing. The very chemistry and geology of the reservoir are transforming in ways its builders never foresaw. 3 hidden crises are unfolding beneath the surface, silent, invisible, and deeply destabilizing. First, the container itself is shrinking. When the Hoover Dam was completed, it stopped the natural flow of the Colorado River. It also stopped the flow of silt and sediment the river had carried for millennia. For nearly 90 years, that sediment has been piling up on the floor of Lake Mead. According to geological surveys, the bottom of the lake has risen by approximately 100 feet since 1935. Think about that. While we watch the water surface drop, the lake floor has been silently rising to meet it. The reservoir's total storage capacity is not what it says on the original engineering diagrams. It is significantly less. The glass is smaller than we thought. Second, the water that remains is becoming more toxic. The rock formations of the Southwest are naturally rich in minerals, including arsenic and manganese. For decades, these heavy metals were diluted in the vastness of a full reservoir, present in concentrations so low they were functionally harmless. But as the lake shrinks, the concentrations rise. It's like a boiling pot of soup. As the water evaporates, the salt gets stronger. Local water treatment plants are now detecting spikes in these contaminants in the raw water they pull from the lake. The water requires more complex, more expensive filtration to make it safe to drink. A hidden tax levied by a dying lake. Third, the ground itself is breaking. In parts of the Las Vegas Valley and other nearby communities, the dropping water table connected to the lake is causing the land to physically sink, a process known as subsidence. As underground clays dry out and compact, the surface gives way, creating massive earth fissures, cracks in the desert floor that can be hundreds of feet long and dozens of feet deep. These fissures can sever utility lines, destroy roads, and crack the foundations of homes. It is a slow-motion earthquake, and it is a problem that is almost never covered by standard homeowners insurance. Your house is cracking because a lake 50 miles away is draining, and you are on your own. These are the compounding crises. The threats that don't make the headlines, but add layers of complexity and cost to an already impossible situation. A shrinking container, poisoned water, and broken ground. This is the reality of a system pushed beyond its limits. So who is responsible? For years, the narrative has been simple. The blame has been placed on the sprawling cities of the desert, on the glittering fountains of the Las Vegas Strip, the lush green lawns of Phoenix, the swimming pools of Los Angeles. The solution, we were told, was personal conservation. Take shorter showers. Turn off the tap when you brush your teeth. And for decades, cities have done exactly that. Las Vegas, in particular, has become a world leader in urban water conservation, recycling nearly 99% of its indoor water. And it has not been enough, because the story about the fountains and the swimming pools was always a convenient distraction, a myth. The truth is far more shocking. Roughly 70 to 80% of the Colorado River's water does not go to cities. It does not go to taps or showers or swimming pools. It goes to agriculture. And not just any agriculture. It is used to irrigate 5.5 million acres of farmland, much of it in the middle of the hottest, driest deserts in North America. An enormous portion of that water is used to grow one of the thirstiest crops on Earth, alfalfa. Hay, grown not to feed Americans, but to be harvested, baled, and exported to countries like China and, most ironically, Saudi Arabia. To feed their livestock. Let that sink in. We are draining the lifeblood of the American Southwest, pushing 40 million people toward a water and energy catastrophe. To grow hay in a desert so it can be shipped across the ocean to a kingdom that exhausted its own water resources decades ago. It is a policy so illogical, so profoundly self-destructive, that it feels like a parody. But it is happening right now, at a scale that dwarfs every other part of the conversation. The problem isn't a long shower. The problem is a global supply chain that treats the Colorado River like an infinite, expendable resource. In the face of this unstoppable decline, one city made an audacious, almost cynical, gamble. A city built on impossible odds decided to double down. Las Vegas. While the world focused on its reputation for excess, the city's water managers were quietly preparing for the apocalypse. They saw the numbers. They saw the trend lines. And they decided they would not be the ones to lose. Their solution was a masterpiece of brutal, pragmatic engineering. In 2015, the Southern Nevada Water Authority completed a project known officially as Intake No. 3, but everyone calls it by its more evocative name, the third straw. It was an $817 million tunnel, 23 feet in diameter, drilled for 3 miles through solid rock deep beneath the floor of Lake Mead. Its purpose was simple, to drink from the very bottom of the glass. The first 2 intakes for Las Vegas sat at 1,050 feet and 1,000 feet. The new third straw accesses water at an elevation of 860 feet. Look at that number again, 860 feet. That is 35 feet below the dead pool level of 895 feet. the point at which water stops flowing to Arizona and California. This is the great, terrifying paradox of the Lake Mead crisis. Because of the third straw, Las Vegas will technically be the last city standing. If and when the lake drops to dead pool, when the canals feeding Phoenix and the aqueducts serving Southern California run dry, when Mexico receives nothing, Las Vegas will still be able to pump water. The city that arguably should never have existed has engineered itself to be the ultimate survivor of a crisis it helped create. It was not a solution for the basin. It was a lifeboat for one city, built just big enough for itself. And so we stand here, in the summer of 2026, at the edge of the precipice. The water level sits at 1,046 feet and falling. The U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, the agency in charge, has put the most probable future on paper, 1,015.77 feet by July 2027, a level that will cripple the Hoover Dam's power generation and push the entire system toward a catastrophic failure. All the pieces are in motion. The hydropower cliff is dead ahead. The policy cliff of the 2026 deadline looms, with the states locked in a political death spiral. Hidden crises, sediment, arsenic, subsidence, are quietly accelerating. The agricultural use remains profoundly unsustainable, a gaping wound in the side of the river, and Las Vegas has its lifeboat, ready to float away while its neighbors sink. The narrative of slow, managed decline is over. The coming years will not be about gentle, incremental shortages. They will be about hard choices and brutal consequences. When the water drops below 1,035 feet, who gets the expensive replacement power? When the 2026 deadline passes without a deal, whose water gets cut off first? When the canal to Phoenix can no longer draw water, what happens to the fifth largest city in the country? These are no longer theoretical questions. The clock has run out. The bill for a century of magical thinking is finally coming due. Okay, last time, I promise. If you made it this far, you're clearly as invested in this as we are. If you haven't subscribed, what are you waiting for? A personal invitation? Consider this it. Please subscribe. It truly makes all the difference. Now, the question remains, is this a managed collapse? Or are we about to witness the system fall apart in real time?